Hello everyone and welcome to something new, something different. Today I'm going to be doing a reaction video, which is not something I ever imagined myself to be doing, but sometimes stuff happens during the day and you just spontaneously need to make a video. So, I don't have a script or an intro for this video, so let's just get straight into it. Today I was browsing YouTube and I was watching a video by Kings and Generals. Kings and Generals is a very good channel, very high quality. I think they've 1 million subscribers, 2 million maybe? I'm not sure. They get hundreds of thousands of views per video. They deserve it. Good stuff. I was watching one of those videos and I noticed there was a video about the first Nilfgaardian War on the that's from The Witcher on my sidebar. Now, I looked at the name of the channel and I saw Wizards and Warriors. I'm like, that seems really familiar. And sure enough, it is a sister channel to Kings and Generals. So I clicked on the channel to have a look at what's on it, and my eye was caught by this video down here, the War of the Last Alliance, Lord of the Rings. Now, normally I don't really watch videos from other Lord of the Rings content creators. That's not because I don't like them. It's because, I kind of know the source material, and I just, I don't really have the time to be doing it. I have watched some of their videos. There are some great videos out there by other Lord of the Rings content creators, and a lot of the good ones are very accurate in what they do. So normally, I wouldn't have watched this video, but Kings and Generals have something of a reputation among historians for sort of embellishing stuff, getting stuff a little wrong, not being entirely accurate. Like I said, I love their videos, and it's provided me with sort of like a base understanding of sort of many historical topics. So I'm not shitting on their channel whatsoever. But I was aware of that. So I decided to watch the video because I wanted to see how accurate it was. Because as you can see, this video has already got 182,000 views in 2 weeks. That's like a fifth of the total views I have on my channel. So they have a massive reach. And what I don't really want to see is really inaccurate stuff, because then it gives people misconceptions about the Tolkien's lore and stuff. It's going to be a big it was a big challenge from the movies, and it's going to be a big challenge from the Amazon series to sort of help people understand what's canon and what isn't. And so that's why I watched this video. I wanted to see how accurate it was. And I don't really need to sort of describe it, but just the fact that I'm making a video on it should probably tell you what I thought of it. The production quality, brilliant. Accuracy, well, we're just going to have to give it a watch. So I'll be pausing it a fair amount, talking about it. Let's get straight into it. Let's go back to the start, and let's watch away.
The War of the Ring was a conflict of huge proportions, wherein the very fate of Middle-earth hung in the balance, as the forces of good and evil clashed throughout the Third Age, with the One Ring providing the impetus for the hostilities. Welcome to the Wizards and Warriors channel. Allow us to present the first episode of our new series on the history of Middle-earth. The War of the Last Alliance is about to begin.
As you can see, the artwork is
The War of
fantastic.
the Ring finds its origin in the Second Age, as following the destruction of Morgoth in the War of Wrath, his lieutenant Sauron assumed the mantle of Dark Lord. Being a Maiar, and thus lacking the sheer might of a true member of the Valar, who had godlike power, Sauron used his guile and innate ability for treachery to fulfill his ambition. He changed his image, disguising himself as the benevolent servant of the Valar, Anatar. In the year 1500 of the Second Age, he used his silver tongue to trick the Forge Master Celebrimbor and the other prominent members of the Noldor elven community living in Middle-earth into forging the rings of power infused with magic.
Okay, so decent intro. Nothing really wrong. Even this bit here, it's very simplified. It's not wrong. That is what Sauron did. He did trick Celebrimbor and other prominent Noldor into forging the Rings of Power. No mention of Galadriel or Gil-galad or Eregion or anything like that. But, like I said, they do simplify things a lot, so this is fine.
There were 20 such rings, 3 bestowed upon the elves, 7 to the dwarves, and 9 to the kings of men, who would later become the Nazgul.
Common misconception. Very common misconception, the idea that the rings were made for, and given to men and dwarves and elves straight away. The 7, the 9, and the 3, so what's that? 19 rings? They were all made for elves. They were all made for elves. There was no difference, at least, there was no difference in between the 7 and the 9. The 3 were different because of, basically, they were made by Celebrimbor without Sauron's help, but with Sauron's knowledge. So they were still linked to the One Ring, they were just different. They were good rings. 7 and the 9 were not. But, yeah, there's no difference between them, and the rings weren't given to dwarves and men straight away. So that's kind of a, misconception.
However, Sauron forged his own ring in secret. One ring which would allow him to exert control upon all others. Upon learning of this treachery, the ring-bearers removed their rings of power, as when they wore such items, Sauron knew of their location and was able to wage war upon them. The conflict...
The big thing was that wearing the rings, while Sauron was wearing the One Ring, would allow him to basically dominate their minds. It's basically mind control. That's why they took their rings off. That's the main reason. That's basically what happened to the Nazgul. So, the elves, the wearers of the 3 were aware. They were the only ones wearing rings at this time. The 7 and the 9 were held by Celebrimbor. Okay, so that's
called the War of the Elves began in 1693, and Sauron's power proved to be too much for the elves. Their kingdoms were devastated, and Sauron became the effective ruler of all of Middle-earth. It was at this time that Barad-dur and the Black Gate in the region of Mordor were raised. However, he failed to dominate the Dwarven ring-bearers due to their stubborn nature. The elven king Gil-galad was pushed all the way to the River Lune, prompting him to request the aid of the men of...
No mention of Eregion. Celebrimbor and Eregion, they're not worth it.
Numenor in the year 1695. This led to the Numenorean invasion of Middle-earth, bringing an army of a scale that has never been fielded by the race of man in the past. The Allied forces won a great victory in 1701 at the Battle of the Gwathlar. The forces of Sauron were driven from the field, and he barely escaped to Mordor. While he...
Okay, so, not wrong. It's... Oh, hello. I've just noticed up here, Mithlond is Mitchlond. Nice. What's Lond mean in, London, is it Sindarin? I think it means haven. Or port. So we got Port of Mitch. Mitch Haven.
He was gathering his...
But anyway, yeah, the description of the War of the Elves and Sauron was very simplified, but not wrong.
Strength. The elves started rebuilding. Gil-galad's lieutenant Elrond was appointed the regent of the easternmost stronghold of the Noldor elves, Rivendell. Meanwhile, the Numenorians reveled in their victory, and over the next centuries colonized the coast of Middle-earth, oppressing the members of their race living on the continent in the process.
Okay, so Numenorians had begun colonizing before the War of the Elves and Sauron by about 400 or so years. So they'd been colonizing for a while already. They didn't get to oppressing men straight away. It took quite a while, and it didn't happen in all areas or to all men. So famously the Numenorians and the Men of Eriador actually got along really well, but infamously the Numenorians and the Gwaithrim got along very poorly. So a bit of a simplification, and the timeline's a bit off, but yeah, we get the point. Get the point.
At the same time, the sources mention their envy.
Oddly enough, I'm noticing here that the Shire, this is mostly part of the Shire, and it's not coloured in for some reason. I don't know why. That should be coloured in. That should be blue.
Of the elven immortality, and the fact that the men were not allowed to sail to the undying lands of Valinor to live an eternal life. This divine...
So I don't know if the creators of the... I don't know if Warriors and Wizards know this, but for the benefit of anyone watching, anyone that's, fairly familiar with Tolkien's lore will know this, but men going to Valinor didn't give them eternal life. Valinor was called the Undying Lands because of the people who lived there, the elves and the Ainur. It wasn't like a fountain of youth.
Divided the Numenorean society into two factions: the faithful, who remained true to their friendship with the elves and loyalty to the Valar, and the king's men, who were led by the ambitions of their monarchs, slowly drifting towards evil.
This is a very minor nitpick. So you notice the faithful guy here has blonde hair. So the faithful actually would have had dark hair and the king's men would have had blonde hair. That's because the faithful were descended mostly from the House of Beor. The House of Beor normally had darker hair, whereas the king's men were mostly descended from the House of Hador, who had blonde hair. So very minor nitpick, not really a big deal at all. But yeah, there's just something for the benefit of the viewer.
Sauron used the animosity between the men and the elves to rally dark forces, and assumed the title of Lord of the Earth and King of Men. His armies attacked the Numenorean cities on the continent in the year 3260, drawing the ire of the proud Numenorean king, Ar-Pharazôn. The latter struck back...
Mispronounced. The PH should sound like an F, so...
Back in 3261. Numenorean forces were so overwhelmingly powerful that Sauron's minions seemingly abandoned their lord. The Numenoreans walked to Barad-dur unopposed and brought Sauron as a prisoner in chains to the island of Numenor.
So, Ar-Pharazôn landed in Umbar and then marched north for 7 days. Sauron came out to meet him, and that's when Sauron's army fled. Ar-Pharazôn didn't march on Barad-dur. He didn't go to Barad-dur. Sauron came to him, and then Sauron basically surrendered. So, not true. Negative.
However, the latter soon worked his way into the court of the King of Numenor. The foul machinations of Sauron would lead to the destruction of Numenor, as he acted as an advisor, poisoning the minds of the people and driving them to their own demise, instigating an invasion of the Undying Lands in 3319.
So he did this with the power of the One Ring, which isn't mentioned here. He probably wouldn't have been able to do this without the One Ring, or at least nowhere near as effectively.
Ar-Pharazôn and his mighty host landed on Aman, but were buried by mounds of dirt by the Valar, who in their
This is like one of those few moments where like kings and generals actually they under exaggerate stuff, or how would you say understate things by saying mounds of dirt. It's like they literally dropped hills on top of Ar-Pharazôn's army. Mounds of dirt just makes it sound so pedestrian.
Sunk their island, killing the majority of the Numenorean people.
Okay, so this is another one of the major incorrect statements in the video. The Valar didn't sink Numenor, Eru Ilúvatar did. The Valar did not have the authority to do any of that stuff. They called upon Eru Ilúvatar to do something about it, and he decided to glass them. If the Valar wanted to do something, they, Ulmo and Ossé probably could have sunk the Numenorian fleet as it crossed to Valinor, but they weren't allowed.
9 ships of the Numenorean faithful were able to flee to Middle-earth, and they were led by Elendil and his 2 sons, Isildur and Anarion. When their forces were separated, the majority of the contingent landed in the south, and would form the Kingdom of Gondor, with the remaining ships landing in the north of the continent to create the Kingdom of Arnor.
Okay, so like I said, the artwork for their videos is normally very good, and as you can see, they've, I don't know where exactly they've, gotten this map from, like the inspiration from the map. I think they've made it themselves, but they've gotten stuff about the Second Age correct. As you can see, like there's massive forests that cover. This is Minhiriath here. This is Enedwaith here. And then you can see Fangorn and Lothlorien are joined together like they were back in these older days. these forests were mostly gone by this point, but you get the point. They looked at the source material and they knew enough to kind of know that these areas were forested. So which is kind of like, this point sort of disappoints me a bit, because normally kings and generals are quite good with their maps. This one, yeah, Arnor and Gondor are like, this is inaccurate. They didn't look like this at this point. Gondor was mostly sort of centered around this area here. They didn't hold all this western territory at this point in time. They didn't hold anything in the south here. Basically, they were centered around like kind of Anorian, Ithilien, and then Calanadon. Calanadon isn't actually coloured in as part of Gondor here, when all this area here was part of Gondor, because, you know, famously they built Isengard and Helm's Deep. Arnor is also incorrect. For some reason, they hold this patch of land here. They didn't actually hold this area. They also historically held, you know, the lands around, this is Rudauer, obviously, this became Rudauer. So, yeah, a bit of a, like, kind of odd with the maps, but, you know,
Survivors
a bit
merged with
disappointing,
the
if anything.
remaining Numenorians, who had colonized the regions in question during the apex of Numenorian power.
I do want to give them credit to this, though, because I've made a video about this topic, about how Gondor and Arnor were founded, and it's a common misconception, and the common question people ask is, like, how the hell did, you know, Elendil and his sons found Gondor and Arnor when they only had 9 ships full of people? And the answer is, like they've just pointed out, these lands were colonized extensively by the Numenorians, and it's in all likelihood there were probably millions of inhabitants in both lands by this point, so they just joined them. They didn't, you know, quadruple, whatever their population in the space of every 10 years.
Sauron also survived the downfall of Numenor, although his strength was much reduced. He was able to flee to Mordor and retain the One Ring. The 2 Numenorian nations in exile were linked with the King of Arnor holding the title of High King and maintaining ascendancy over their Gondorian counterparts. 2 fortresses were built in the region of Gondor to act as a bulwark against Mordor, Minas Ithil and Minas Tirith. In the War of Wrath, Anarion was numbers, who Sauron had finally regained enough of his strength.
So, yeah, they said Minas Tirith. It was called Minas Anor at this point. It wasn't renamed Minas Tirith for another 2,000 years. So, yeah, minor nitpick there.
In order to take physical form. Becoming aware of the newly established exile kingdoms, he quickly took action to destroy them.
That's supposed to be the Witch King.
3429,
that's neat.
His armies attacked Gondor rapidly, besieging Minas Ithil and the capital of Gondor, Osgiliath. Minas Ithil was lost soon after, as the city's defenders were overwhelmed by the Orcish numbers, who took the city with relative ease. While Anarion held the line in Osgiliath with the force that he had hastily assembled, Isildur rushed north to inform his father, Elendil, of the attack. Anarion was successful in repelling the invasion force and sending them fleeing into the woods of Ithilien.
Oof. Not the best time to pause there. So yeah, mostly true. You'll notice already that they have a habit of sort of embellishing stuff. It's not really a big deal as long as you're drawing those embellishments from the text. If, like, you know, you're drawing stuff that's implied from the text, or you're just kind of using colorful language. Anarion drove the orcs all the way back to the mountains. I'm a massive Anarion fan, so I will not stand for Anarion to ever be undercredited, basically.
Taking counsel with the elven leaders, the last alliance of men and elves was formed, with Elendil and Gil-galad providing leadership for each of their races, respectively. 2 years were spent raising sufficient forces in order to match the hordes of orcs that the Dark Lord could bring to bear.
So, it hasn't been mentioned at this point, and also I don't believe it gets mentioned in the video at all, is that Sauron didn't just have orcs, he had men from the east, he had men from the south, he had black Numenorians fighting for him as well, and he also actually had some dwarves fighting for him too. So, yeah, this video, they just only mention orcs, but Sauron's forces were a lot more varied than that, so, yeah.
Their forces amassed at the watchtower of Amon-Sul at Weathertop, before moving to Rivendell and joining with the forces of Elrond there. From here, the Great Alliance crossed the Misty Mountains and were joined by contingents of elves from Mirkwood and Lorien, as well as an army of dwarves of Khazad-dûm and the army of Gondor led by Anarion, fresh from pushing back the assault on Osgiliath. With this, the war was joined, and the Alliance seemed poised to end the influence of the Dark Lord upon Middle-earth for good and all. The first pitched battle took place at the plains of Dagorlad, outside of Mordor, in the year 3434, with supreme command of the Alliance forces being granted to Gil-galad. However, this grant of command triggered the arrogance of the elves, namely that of the kings of Mirkwood and Lorien, Orifer and Amdir respectively. As both forces deployed their formations, one of the main advantages the last alliance possessed was their cohesion and discipline, for which the elven swordsmen in particular were famed far and
Like I said, they embellish stuff, but it's not technically incorrect, so it's fine.
wide. Yet the two aforementioned kings, angered by Gil-galad's command, broke formation and charged wildly at the immense force of orcs and foul beasts, attempting to garner fame and fortune by their exploits. Despite making early gains and driving the orcs back by the sheer force of their strength at arms, the numbers and sheer brutality of their foe soon led to casualties among the elves. Before long, the elves who had foolishly charged into the forces of the Dark Lord were pushed back, leaving the fate of the battle on a knife's edge. His plan disrupted by the folly of his comrades.
Alright, so yeah, that is an important part of the Battle of Dagorlad. It's that the Sylvan Elves charge. Now, in the books, it's never mentioned if Amdir, that's King of Lorien, whether he charged alongside Orifer, who was King of Greenwood. Amdir is known as Malgalad in Unfinished Tales, and that's where he's mentioned most. And it's just mentioned that he was cut off and driven into the Dead Marshes, where he was there killed. This isn't shown in their graphic here, but yeah, he's never lumped in with Orifer. But yeah, Orifer does charge ahead and die pointlessly, and he's an idiot. But yep, this is mostly good so far.
Galad acted decisively, supporting the errant elven contingent with the weight of the entirety of what the free peoples of Middle-earth could muster. The leadership of Gil-galad ultimately saved the day, and the war effort as a whole, as the forces of Sauron were decisively beaten, leaving the Dark Lord on the back foot for the remainder of the war. Yet this battle was as costly as they come, with Amdir, Orifer, and a vast contingent of Mirkwood and Lorien forces lost due to the folly of the two kings.
Was it a third of? I think it was a third of Lorien's elves, and no, I think it was half of Lorien's elves and 2/3 of the Greenwood elves who joined the battle actually perished in this fight. So it was very costly
this
for
left
them.
the area permanently scarred by the mass of human, elven, dwarven, and orcish casualties, which now blighted the landscape, forever transforming the region into the Dead Marshes, an area avoided by all but the most desperate. Thranduil and Amroth would take the titles of Kings of Lorien and Mirkwood from their slain fathers, respectively.
Greenwood.
Taking little time to regroup, Gil-galad sensed the golden opportunity which now beckoned, and following the counsel of the other leaders of the Alliance, Elendil and Elrond chief among them, a decision was taken. The Black Gates were besieged, and soon breached due to the sheer might of the force which now moved even further into Mordor, defeating each force which Sauron sent to face them. While ultimate success was not yet guaranteed, the forces of man, elf and dwarf were buoyed by each victory, and with their morale soaring, their greatest challenge now loomed before them. Despite severe losses, they maintained an advantage, which prevented this war of attrition in a plateau to the north of Mordor called Udun from halting their progress. Initially, attempts were made to storm Barad-dur, but this failed almost immediately due to the immense fortifications which Sauron had erected in order to prepare for just such a situation.
I don't think don't think the Last Alliance actually tried to storm Barad-dur. I don't think that's ever mentioned. I might be wrong. I might be willing to concede this one. But I don't think it's ever mentioned. I think it's just mentioned that they besieged Barad-dur, so...
The fortress was created by the dark magic of Sauron, which held it together, and was composed of battlement after battlement, and had taken close to 600 years to construct, and was without any shadow of a doubt the greatest fortress in Middle-earth. The sight of it drove fear into the besiegers, and cast doubt upon their ability to seize the victory they so desperately required to end the threat posed to all those who resided within the free realms of Middle-earth.
Probably true, probably
This
true.
fortress was also bound to the One Ring, and as long as the ring persisted, it would remain impossible to fully destroy it, adding to the mounting logistical complications which such a siege could pose to Gil-galad and Elendil. The siege would go on for 7 years, with massive casualties dealt to the forces of the Last Alliance. Countless sorties of orcs were sent out to drive back the besiegers, which when combined with the volleys of arrows, boulders, and missiles of the flaming variety that constantly harassed the attackers, threatened to decimate the Alliance forces. In the 6th year of the siege, tragedy struck the line of Elendil as Anarion was hit by a missile fired from the walls of Barad-dur in the head and was killed instantly.
Crushed his helmet, so it probably did kill him instantly. He probably, head probably exploded. Ooh. Poor Anarion.
His death caused many woes among the Numenorians, who mourned his valor and competent leadership. This, however, increased the determination of the race of men to secure their future in those fiery plains. A year later, Sauron and his forces sallied forth in an attempt to bring an end to the conflict and finish the siege and the Last Alliance with it.
So, I kind of don't like how they've sort of framed it here. When Sauron sallies forth, he sallies forth because he's got nothing left. This is his last desperate roll of the dice. This way they've sort of framed it here makes it seem like that the Last Alliance was in trouble and that Sauron was on the front foot. That absolutely wasn't true. He did send out sorties of orcs, but they all failed. Sauron was losing. This was the Hail Mary.
Those of elven swordsmen who made up the flower of the host held the center, alongside the most experienced and battle-hardened of the Numenorians.
We don't know their order of battle.
With Dwarven contingents supporting the remaining warriors of Gondor and Arnor on the flanks.
We don't know that.
Elrond and Gil-galad held command of the center, with Elendil and Isildur commanding their own respective forces. The blood of Numenor still flowed freely through the forces of man at this stage in the Exile, and as such, these warriors remained exceptionally competent and unyielding in the face of the overwhelming Orcish onslaught. Despite their prowess in battle, however, the forces of the Last Alliance remained outnumbered. The forces of Mordor surged forward in a tide bereft of any true tactics. They attempted to use the weight of their numerical advantage to overwhelm the organized and tactically astute battle lines assembled before them. While their weapons and armor were deficient in comparison to those of their opponents, their ferocity and crazed devotion to their Dark Lord were not to be scoffed at.
Very embellished.
The battle was joined when the Orcish host met the Elven swordsmen in the center, their forces having been thinned out by the overwhelmingly accurate volleys of arrows unleashed by the Elven archers. The lines held as the warriors of the Last Alliance refused to grant their opponents an inch, as the famed discipline of Noldor was able to keep the Orcish host at bay.
Of Noldor.
Despite the increasing pressure which was placed upon their lines, this stalemate was maintained, with massive casualties inflicted on both sides. As the battle progressed, the Last Alliance began to gain the advantage, standing as a cliff before...
Look, just the way he's describing it, like, this is all made up. It's kind of... But I'm not going to say it's entirely wrong, because he they're sort of just filling in the blanks. But yeah, this is kind of sort of just fan fiction. Sort of, like, I mean, it's, yeah.
Before the oncoming tide, the morale of the orcish rabble began to falter, and it seemed that victory now was within the grasp of Gil-galad and Elendil. It was at this point that Sauron, in his physical form of a towering warrior, clad in plate armor from head to toe, and wielding a mace alongside the One Ring, entered the fray. Making for the center of the Alliance formation, he soon made light work of the valiant warriors who had held his servants at bay for so long. Seeing that their lines might now break, Gil-galad rushed into the gap and dueled the Dark Lord on the broken slopes of Mount Doom. Despite being the finest warrior of his age, and the true embodiment of the nobility of the elves, Gil-galad's fate was sealed. Sauron had regained the entirety of his strength during the siege, and bearing the One Ring, he was able to defeat the now exceptionally weary Gil-galad, who was cast down with the heat of Sauron's armored hand.
It's true.
Elendil rushed to Gil-galad's aid, but he was also no match for Sauron. Due to the power of the ring, the two great leaders of the host were slain before the eyes of Isildur and Elrond. Just as all seemed lost, Isildur scrambled forward to attempt to take up the great sword Narsil, which his father had dropped following his death at the hands of the great enemy. Their weapons clashed, and Sauron broke Narsil in half. The Dark Lord then reached downwards to end the last hope of man using the immense heat of the ring, and at this point, the great defiance which man had shown in their time in Middle-earth surged through Isildur. Slashing wildly with his now broken sword, almost by reflex, Isildur cut the One Ring from the Dark Lord's grasp. With the sheer weight of the blow driving him from his physical form and causing him to take on his ethereal aspect, Sauron was forced to flee the field, which sent his entire army into a rout. In the aftermath...
Okay, alright. So this makes me wonder if they're following the movie canon, but that isn't even what happened in the movie. Okay, this hurts the most. This bit hurts the most out of the entire sort of video, I feel. Alright, the confrontation between Elendil, Gil-galad, and Sauron, it was basically a fight where they all died. Gil-galad and Elendil died in the process, but they also basically they mortally wounded Sauron. He was dying. He was physically dying. That is death. Death in Tolkien's universe is the separation between Hroa and Yefeya, with the spirit and the body. So basically, Isildur just sort of cleaned up. When he cut the ring from Sauron's finger, Sauron was on the ground, either already dead or dying. That's basically all Isildur did. He was present, but he didn't kill Sauron. Elendil and Gil-galad, basically, they're credited with killing Sauron. Narsil didn't snap when Isildur tried to attack Sauron with it. Narsil snapped when Elendil basically fell beneath his own sword, fell on top of his own sword. That's what broke it. Yeah, this bit is very inaccurate. It almost sort of makes me assume that they sort of just watched the movie, but then sort of didn't even follow it 100% either. So I don't know what the deal is here. It's quite not good. Not good, this part of the video. I mean, there's been several issues already, but this is the glaring one. This is a really big one. So
Elrond, who was now the highest-ranking surviving member of the Elven host, counseled for the destruction of the ring, bringing Isildur within the depths of Mount Doom, the only place where it could be destroyed.
This is a movie-only scene. In the books, they never go to Mount Doom. So.
Yet, Isildur had become entranced by its power and refused, claiming it as recompense for the death of his father. This ultimately sundered the last alliance, making elves forever wary of the weakness of man, and making it impossible for Barad-dur to be destroyed in its entirety, or Sauron to be vanquished forever. Taking leave of the charred plains of Mordor, Isildur began the long journey home, for he was to be proclaimed as High King of Arnor. Yet this was not to be. On the way, Isildur and his retinue were ambushed by a contingent of orcs from the Misty Mountains. Isildur and his 3 eldest sons were slain, and the ring was lost in the river Anduin. The defeat of Sauron in the War of the Last Alliance would usher in the Third Age of Middle-earth, and set the scene for his ultimate return and the War of the Ring, which would forever change the fate of Middle-earth and all who resided within it. However, this is the story for our next documentary on the history of Middle-earth. The next few videos in this series will be dedicated to the battles of the War of the Ring, but we're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button.
Alright. Okay. So yeah, as you can see, like, there's so many little minor details in Tolkien's work where, you know, if you're not someone who has read the book so many times, or, you know, like, spends a ludicrous amount of time researching stuff, because that's what I do. That's what I do in my videos. You know, some of the videos I've written, it takes 6 hours, because, I mean, like, there are so many little things, and they're spread across multiple books. Like, there's stuff in the actual Lord of the Rings itself, and then there's stuff inside the, you know, Unfinished Tales, the Silmarillion, the appendices, the History of Middle-earth books. So, you know, you can't be expected to get every single thing correct. And, like, you know, minor errors will happen. Minor errors have happened in my videos. People have corrected me in my comment sections. You know, there's probably an error in most of my videos, right? But the big errors are the ones that are less forgivable, saying stuff like, you know, the Valar sunk Numenor. No, they didn't. In the end there, like, the complete description of the, you know, confrontation between Gil-galad, Elendil, and Sauron, it being completely incorrect. That's kind of disappointing stuff. I'm not sure, you know, what the research was for this video. I'm not sure what they're going for exactly. I'm not exactly sure, you know, are they trying to follow the movie canon or the book canon, or are they trying for something in between? It just seems very all over the place, and unfortunately so far it seems like they've made up quite a lot of stuff. That being said, this is fun. I'm interested to see where their series goes, especially the War of the Rings stuff. I feel like if, you know, you're covering War of the Ring battles, it's going to become a lot more obvious what they're actually trying to do, whether they're following movie stuff, book stuff, and also, you know, if they start screwing stuff up in those videos, there's sort of a lot less of an excuse for that. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on this channel. Like I said, I don't mean to sort of shit on wizards and generals, wizards and warriors, kings and generals. I don't mean to do that, because they put a lot of work into their videos, like, absolutely. But as someone who, you know, I wouldn't, you know, arrogantly call myself like a Tolkien expert, but who, you know, knows more than, you know, clearly the research on this video does, this was kind of disappointing for me. The people who watch my channel probably felt a similar way about this video. I did actually catch a few people in the comment section of the Wizards and Warriors video who I recognized from my own comment section. But, you know, thank you guys who watched this video, but hopefully some of the people who watched the Wizards and Warriors video will end up seeing my video as well, my reaction to it, because, like I said at the start, you know, like, misinformation about a fantasy series is not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's not making the world any worse. But, you know, like I said, it's just disappointing from my perspective that basically something like this with so much production value and so many people working on it can be so inaccurate. I just feel like it's sort of doing a disservice to Tolkien's lore, really. you know, this isn't an adaptation for film and like for film or TV or video games where changes will have to be made. This is a video which is telling, showing people's Tolkien's lore, but then showing it in an incorrect way. But anyway, like I said, this was fun. Kings and Generals, great channel. Wizards and Warriors, great channel. Follow the advice on screen. Like the videos, subscribe them. Maybe don't share this one, but other videos they put up are quite good. Anyway, thank you for watching me. Jeez, how long is this video gonna go? 40 minutes. Thank you for watching me be slightly amused, slightly irritated, slightly pissed off. Not really. Yeah. See you in the next video.